In this week's Parsha, Vayeishev, we have two very interesting and quite perplexing incidents. The one is the sale of Yosef by his brothers, where they sell him into slavery. And the other one is the incident with Yehudah and Tamar, where Yehudah conceives children with the woman who is later essentially to be his wife, but who at the time he thinks is in fact a prostitute. Very strange. And the one follows right after the other, so there seems to be some sort of connection. The way the Maggid of Dubno phrases this question is that from this liaison of Yehudah and Tamar comes in fact Mashiach, comes the Messiah, comes the person who will usher in the kingdom of Hashem on earth and the perfection of the world, and yet his source is from such an unpleasant, ugly incident. So the one thing to be said in Yehudah's defense, and the rabbis all make a point of pointing out, that this was certainly not his regular modus operandi or form of behavior. That in fact, the way the Gemara puts it is that malach dechafo, an angel pushed him into it. And lest you say this is merely a defense put up after the fact, but is not reflective of the reality. And if you look at the incident itself, it's quite clear that Yehudah has absolutely no idea what he's doing, that this is clearly something at which he is not practiced. Because would you try to conduct any business transaction with a stranger on the basis of credit? What the Torah tells us is that he propositions her, and she says, well, what will you give me? So he says, later on I will send you an animal from my flock. And she says, it doesn't work like that, right? We work on payment now, COD, right? Not payment later. So he says, well, what kind of security could I offer you? And she tells him, your signet ring, your wrap, your staff. But he doesn't know. He simply doesn't understand how this works. So clearly this is not his regular thing. But why is it packaged in this unpleasant way? So the Maggid of Dubno explains it with the story. Is that he says there was a town where the custom was that when a couple became engaged, the rabbi would write a letter to the family, let's say the family of the groom, speaking in praise of the groom and what a fine young man he was, and his excellent midot, his good character, the level of his Torah learning, his wisdom, insight, knowledge. So there was said this whole thing, and as a thank you, the family would send a gift basket to the rabbi. So that was the understanding of how these things would go. Anyway, one young couple becomes engaged. The family receives a letter from the rabbi, and they are unpleasantly surprised to see that it's quite an ugly, used, crumpled, dirty envelope, inside of which is an ugly, used, crumpled, dirty letter. And when they start reading the letter, they see that it's the most magnificent letter, full of praise for this young man and his outstanding qualities, far more than the rabbi usually writes in one of these letters. So they really are confused that he would do such a thing. But nonetheless, the protocol is to send back the gift basket. So they put the most beautiful gifts in an ugly, old, dirty, broken basket, which they then send to the rabbi. A few days later, the rabbi and the father of the groom meet up. The rabbi says to him, he says, I don't understand. You sent me such a beautiful gift and such unpleasant packaging. So he said, yes, that's the same thing you did with me when you sent me that letter. Now, how is this connected? So what the Maggid of Dubno says is that Hashem's plan entailed that Yosef would end up going down to Egypt. Hashem had in mind that the Jewish people would be brought to Egypt, and that you would have the story of the development, what the Maharal of Prague calls almost the gestation period of the Jewish people in the land of Egypt to achieve maturity as a nation. But it didn't necessarily have to happen in the unpleasant way in which it did, which involved a 17-year-old being sold as a slave, being placed in this foreign environment with all of these physical and spiritual challenges, ultimately thrown into prison. Everything that came about, that was done because this was how Yehudah chose to behave. This was how he chose essentially to package the salvation of the Jewish people. Now, we are dealing with very righteous and holy individuals, but this was not a good move on Yehudah's part to package this ultimately good thing of Yosef coming down to Egypt in this unpleasant packaging. And so Hashem says to him, Yehudah, you are a righteous man, and you will indeed merit to be the ancestor of Mashiach. But you too will have it come about in an unpleasant way, in an ugly package. And within that ugly package will be something beautiful, the same way as within the ugliness of Yosef's slavery was hidden something beautiful. And the idea here, and I was actually discussing this with my friend Rabbi Friedman, the idea here is that it's not just what you do. So much of it is about how it's done, about the way in which you do things. You know, there are times that we need to do things that are not nice, that are not pleasant, that are not welcomed by people. And the question is, how are you going to be doing that? Are you going to do it with sensitivity, with compassion? Let's say the time has come that a person no longer plays a role in your organization, or their role is no longer necessary in your organization, or you can't afford them, or whatever it is. You need to let someone go. So how do you do it? Do you tell them you're fired? Or do you find a way to find them a new job, write them a good reference letter, deal with it in a sensitive and caring way? They're terrible stories of the first time that a person hears that they're fired is when they hear it announced publicly, right? It may well be, and then the boss will turn around and say, well, that's what I needed to do. It may well be that he did. Sometimes we do need to do such things. The question is, how do you do it? Maybe the package is of value. Maybe the goal, the action, what you're trying to achieve is worthwhile. But how is it that you go about doing it? So this is not a discussion of whether the ends justify the means or not. This is a discussion where the ends are necessary and good, but you have a choice of putting in the extra effort, care, thought, and sensitivity of doing it in a good way, or taking what's often the easy or convenient way out, doing it in a callous, uncaring way. Yehudah unfortunately he made the mistake, we see, of selling Yosef, of selling him into slavery, of taking his own brother and exchanging him for money. And as a result, the greatest destiny of the Jewish people is ultimately brought about through something not so good. But that teaches us this lesson. You can bring good things about in a beautiful way, and you can bring them about. You can even bring unpleasant things that need to be done around in a way of sensitivity, kindness, compassion, and love. Shabbat Shalom.